Good morning, everyone. This is the call to order for the Buncombe County Planning Board on September the 15th, 2025.
Well, we can't really call it.
Oh.
We can have a discussion about lighting that is
Okay.
broadcast to the public.
All right.
You can note we don't have a quorum.
Well, yes. Then correction to this, we are not calling the meeting to order because sadly we do not have a quorum today, so we will not be able to conduct any official business, no voting. And the good news is this was only going to be a discussion session today anyway, but we will not be approving the minutes. We will not be taking any kind of official action, but we will proceed as best we can with everything else, and we will have public comment. So with all of that said, today, we will have one opportunity for public comment, and this will be our general comment period where we can talk on any topic for thoughts wishing to be shared with the planning board. And if anyone is here that wishes to speak, I think we have one. Thank you, Bernie. During the public comment, please be sure you signed up to speak on the sign-in sheet by the door, and each person will have 3 minutes to speak. And also, well, we may be able to make an exception. If it's agreeable with those who are here, we can certainly do that.
The rules don't apply. The rules don't apply. You can have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think we're amenable to that. So
Can I make a motion that we can allocate time to talk about the people who didn't show up
And
today?
we can't
We
make.
can't vote on it.
Okay,
yeah,
so we can't talk about the other people who weren't here. All right.
apparently not.
It sounds like staff has a presentation. Hear from that. If you want to hang around for anyone to talk to us, I'm sure we're happy to do that.
It might be better to do the presentation first because I think he has comments on what we proposed.
Oh, do you?
Lighting
Yeah.
with
There's no
Yeah.
format yet. Were you going to comment on the lighting?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Sounds like a good idea.
Bernie is somewhat of a lighting expert. So, yeah. Okay. Then we will move right along. Do we have any announcements from the staff?
I already made the announcement about the 15th. They're gonna supposedly install the audio equipment on the 15th. So hopefully next meeting we will be 35-foot thin and then new board.
Okay. Very good. We'll look forward to that. All right. And we'll do the roll call of the board members who are here. And we'll start with John,
Ken's here.
Nancy Waldrop.
Alan Coxey.
Okay. Then we can't approve the agenda. We can't approve the minutes. So we'll move the public comment to until after the staff presentation about the lighting proposed amendments. So we'll go ahead and proceed with that, which is ZPH 2025-00024, which are proposed amendments again for the lighting amendments we're getting ready to vote on at some point, but not today. Okay. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you. So yes, today we are going to talk about the proposed lighting text amendments. At our next meeting, we will do a work session where we can really get into some details and discussion, questions, things like that. And then the third meeting would be a public hearing to actually review the final proposed version or make additional changes. So today is just an introduction to get you familiar with the topic. And I should also say this is about outdoor lighting. So this is not interior building code lighting or anything that would happen inside of a building. This is commercial lighting that goes on the outside of developments. This is multifamily apartment lighting. This does not include single family residential lighting. So we're looking more at the commercial levels of kind of common area lighting. So we're going to go over the purpose of lighting ordinance. We'll do kind of a lighting 101 for anybody that's maybe not so familiar with the technical aspects of exterior lighting. We'll do a quick equity analysis of why it might impact some people different than others. Some of the research that staff did into ordinances in other jurisdictions. A brief summary of what our ordinance currently says about exterior lighting. a summary of the proposed text amendments that we're going to look at in more detail at the next meeting, and then how our proposal aligns with the comprehensive plan. So that is this presentation for today. So the purpose of an exterior lighting ordinance is to minimize light pollution, it's to reduce light trespass and glare, and to promote energy efficient practices. That's why we're focusing on lighting that goes on the outside of buildings and parking lots, pretty much in common spaces where it could impact other properties and people. So lighting crash course, there's a bunch of different slides in here. We're going to go over like really big level ideas related to lighting. The first one, maybe one of the most important ones, is cutoff types. So the way that a light bulb is shielded can impact where that light falls. So the first one, non-cutoff light, that means that that light goes in all directions. It goes up, sideways. You cannot control where that light is going to fall. It's the most intrusive type of lighting. Semi-cutoff has a little bit of a cutoff on the top, but it still does tend to throw lighting up. A cutoff means that there's like a 90-degree angle that it does not go above, and then full cutoff is directing that light primarily downward. The goal of this is to put the lighting where it's needed and to try to prevent that light from going into areas where it's not intended to go, like into your neighbor's living room window or up into the atmosphere where you're going to end up with night glow and things that impact, the overall community. The next concept is Kelvin rating, which is basically just the color of the light coming out of that bulb. So the lower the number, the warmer that light, the more orange, the more red, and the higher the number, as you get into like the 10,000 kelvins, you're going into blue, hospital blue, industrial blue, that kind of thing. So when we look at research, we see that those lower, warmer colors are healthier for people and for wildlife. Less impact on our sleep cycles, less impact on our health. As you go higher, it causes more glare. So if you've ever been driving on the road and suddenly you're blinded by somebody's light as you're passing, maybe a pole light or a street light or the oncoming car, that is glare, and that causes eye strain, temporary blindness, makes it difficult to read signs, that kind of thing. One of the causes of accidents at night is light pollution, the wrong kind of light pollution. So color temperature is something that we'll talk about a lot. Any question about those last two slides? Cutoff types, color temperature? No? Okay. Then in terms of types of lighting, there's all different types. One of them is backlit signs. So that's when a sign is lit internally. So the bulb itself is not visible. It's the sign messaging that is lit up. And one thing to note is that Buncombe County does not regulate signs, but we do regulate the lighting that is within or pointed at signs. So if we talk about sign lighting, we're not looking at the messaging on the sign. We're not looking at the construction of the sign. We're actually only talking about the lighting itself. Other types of lighting that we will talk about is facade lighting. So that's when the lighting is illuminating a structure. There's accent lighting. Typically, you'll see that in landscaping, maybe a light pointed up into a tree or some other pretty feature. Ornamental gas flame lamps, where there is an actual flame. You'll see that in really nice developments sometimes, or in residential communities. Wall packs, I would say, one of the most common types of lights that you'll see in a commercial development. So they can be used either to light up the side of the building, or they can be used as spot lighting to help pedestrians reach an entrance. Also for security, and then pole lights. So pole lights might be lighting up a sidewalk. They might be used in a parking lot. You'll see them as street lighting along the roadway. So lots of different applications for those types of lights. The next concept is foot candles, which is currently how Buncombe County measures the level of light in a development. So you'll see on the right, there's a example of a photometric plan, and that's the type of plan that we get when we get a commercial lighting plan, and it's how we determine, one of the ways we determine if they're meeting the lighting requirements. So you basically get a site plan with all these little numbers all around it, and it represents the level of light at any given point. So you can see where there's areas where the light is really high, and then you can see where there's areas that the light's really low or at zero. That's how we can determine if light is spreading onto an adjacent property and by how much. They use those numbers to calculate what the total light level is for the whole development. So if you look at that average light level, you can tell, wow, this development site is really, really bright, or it might be something lower than that. So we talk about foot candles because it does give us different information about how the development is laid out, how that light is spread across the development, and how bright the overall development is. Any questions about that? So I had already mentioned glare. I think the picture on the left is really a good example of what glare is. The light is non-directional. It kind of goes everywhere, and it makes it difficult to see. So instead of providing, a nice lighting atmosphere, it can actually cause eye strain, accidents, other issues, and that's one of the things that we want to prevent. Our current zoning ordinance does a pretty good job at preventing glare, but there are improvements that we can make. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking at. And then light pollution, it has to do with that light going somewhere that it was not meant to be. So how can we protect our night sky, especially in rural areas? How can we make the night environment more pleasant for people so that there is less eye strain, there are less impacts to neighboring properties? Those are all some of the issues that we're trying to solve with this. So in terms of an equity analysis, we talked about how light pollution can have negative effects on people. It can be harmful to wildlife and plants that need darkness to hunt, to sleep, to nest, and have places to be at night. And then in terms of communities, when we look at the research, we see that non-white communities and renters are more impacted by light pollution than other communities. A lot of times that's because those neighborhoods are closer to commercial or industrial sites where the light might have more of an impact or be less shielded. And so they have more negative health outcomes that are directly related to lighting pollution. So we'll talk about that more when we get to the next meeting, but those are some of the things that we've been thinking about in terms of impact. This is an example of just 3 of the lighting ordinances that we looked at. Staff did a lot of research to see kind of what sorts of things other jurisdictions are regulating and how. So we looked at Asheville, Henderson County, and Chatham County as examples. And people are kind of all over the place, and it really depends on whether you're looking at an urban zoning ordinance or more rural or suburban zoning ordinance, what they tend to focus on. Most places do focus on the cutoff type and the Kelvin rating. Some places also have bug rating requirements, which is not something that's part of our current ordinance. It's a different way of rating the type of light and the spread of light. And then there are some places that do dark sky ordinances, which is kind of like the gold standard of lighting regulation. You'll see that a lot more on like the coast where there's concerns about marine life. But these are just a few of the examples of places that we looked and trying to make sure that we are also looking at neighboring communities to see how people close to the county are doing their lighting ordinances. So this is a summary of the proposed text amendments. These are the different topics that we will be bringing to you at the work session to discuss. And I'll just run through them really quick. We've got a new definition of accent lighting, electronic message displays, and facade lighting. We would like to update the lighting standard purpose statement, remove the assembly standard and dusk to dawn 5-year conformity standards, we'd like to add an exemption for gas flame lamps and low voltage landscape lighting, prohibit outward facing lights and animated or flashing lights, clarify sections that are vague or conflicting, reorganize the foot candle, Kelvin, and height standards into more readable tables and add some additional requirements. We'd like to add graphics to illustrate some of the key concepts, require lighting to be aimed and shielded with some limited exceptions, create options for non-conforming sites to be able to update their lighting in a reasonable manner, update or create standards for motion activated lighting, street lights, outdoor sports fields, electronic message displays, and backlit signs. Create options for smaller scale lighting plans to be able to bypass photometric requirements, which can be very time consuming and expensive, and remove the as-built drawing requirement for permits and the 10 business day review reference, which is outdated. So those are kind of the big picture summaries of what we'll be digging into with these proposed lighting text amendments. Any questions about those? Okay. In terms of alignment with our comprehensive plan recommendations, there's lots of different ways that lighting can meet some of our goals, but these are the ones that seem the most obvious. Supporting and protecting agricultural and forest lands, environmentally sensitive areas, and rural communities is one of the goals. Preserving our natural heritage, promoting our ecosystem enhancement, utilizing environmental protection and land conservation to promote health, and implementing policies around new development and redevelopment to advance decarbonization and sustainability goals. So those are some of the policies and actions from the adopted comprehensive plan that we identified to work with our lighting ordinance changes. So like I said, the next steps are to hold a work session to really dig into the specific text amendment proposals and get more information to you all, answer questions, and then the third meeting would be a public hearing to make a decision on those changes.
At what point, if I can ask a question, at what point do we look at the growth and equity lens with this?
So we can talk about that more at the next meeting. Jillian, what would a typical, how would we typically dive more into that equity lens in a work session? Do you have any insight into that?
What do you mean dive into it?
Well, whenever we do any amendments, that's part of the discussion. I didn't see it here, and yet it's in one of the introductory things.
So it would be part of the memo we send you, the
Yeah.
equity analysis, where we talk, but Shannon sort of hit the main points about its lighting can be detrimental to not only people, but the environment and animals,
Mhm.
but it also does tend to be more of a problem in communities of color and poor communities.
And our memo will have source references to where, you know, what research we looked at, if that's something that you wanted to get into more of.
UNCA has a observatory. They've invested a lot in that, and it is a fabulous addition to our community. Have y'all considered how much regulation is needed to kind of protect that kind of observatory? Western North Carolina actually has 4 observatories that I'm aware of. And do you have to reduce lighting just in a general vicinity of an observatory, or are you trying to achieve an overall reduction in light pollution for an entire city? Can you speak to me about observatories?
Yeah, so there's different goals depending on whether you're in an urban area or rural area. Obviously, in rural areas, you want to protect the night sky as much as possible. The observatories typically recommend dark sky ordinances as a minimum to help meet their goals for being able to view different, you know, celestial bodies. But for us, we looked at places like our commercial cores and what type of lighting would be typical in those areas, and what we could do that's kind of a reasonable balance between the needs of commercial businesses, safety issues, and trying to keep that light trespass off of adjacent properties, residential properties, essentially. So the way that our proposals are structured is if you are a commercial property next to other commercial properties, you would have more options than if you're a commercial property right next to residential subdivision. So trying to, give more flexibility depending on specific scenarios. And then as you get out more into those rural areas, that's where there would be higher standards in order to try to protect the night sky.
Are we making any efforts to protect the night sky for Buncombe County, given that we have at least one observatory here?
Mhm. So we currently have full cutoff requirements for most uses. We are looking to expand that a little bit more, add a little bit more protections for full cutoff overall. But the proposals that we're bringing you are pretty status quo. They're not making any major changes or going into a dark sky ordinance or anything like that. So it's adjusting things where we think it would be supportable, maybe getting some new regulations that would just fix some of the issues we've had over the years with lighting, but really not doing a wholesale rewrite of the ordinance.
Next area I wanted to ask about was the Duke Energy, and it seems like a few years ago they changed out most of the fixtures on light poles.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that? I'm not familiar with what they did or what's on the poles now.
Yeah. So they have been very cooperative with making sure that all of the lights that go in are compliant with Buncombe County's ordinance. So they're all full cutoff when they swap out those street lights. I don't know if they're compliant with the Kelvin rating. It's usually the cutoff requirement that they focus on. But when a new development goes in, a commercial development or apartment, a lot of times they will choose Duke as the installer for all of their parking lot or street lights. And at that point, because it's a private development and not like a highway light, that's when staff do get a chance to check it for compliance. And it does have to meet all of the requirements. Duke did get a chance to look at our proposed text amendments and provide comments. And so they were fine with all of the recommendations. We did have to adjust some of the maximum pole heights to make sure that if they had lighting that was going to go up like on a concrete block or something in a parking lot, that we were taking that additional concrete height into consideration when we had our maximum limits. So we have addressed what their concerns were. And they don't have any issue with being in compliance with these new requirements if they're approved.
Okay. And then I guess lastly, what is the impact of these text amendments on energy conservation? Do the changes actually pull down consumption, or you talked about carbon reduction, so just a little bit about that.
It depends on the site. It's up to developers how much lighting they want to do up to the maximum allowed for the overall development site. So some of these, especially for smaller developments, if they want to take advantage of not having to do a photometric plan, which can be really expensive, then they're going to have to provide fewer lights. And that can have a big savings. Asking that they do things on a motion activated timer can, resulting in not having that light on all night long, that will have an impact. There's lots of little ways that we can save energy, not just for the business, but for the community overall. But it's very much a menu of options, and developers just have to choose what their priority is. Do they want to have a ton of light that is lower voltage, or do they want to have really high intensity light in one area? So it just depends on the development site.
Are there bulb type options for exterior lighting that we're talking about? I know in the interior residential kind of setting, there's lots of bulb options now that really reduce consumption or whatever. Is that available too for exterior commercial lighting?
We don't have a requirement for the bulb type. We don't say you have to use LEDs. What we do say is that if you're going to have an LED, your Kelvin temperature, that color of that light cannot exceed a certain amount. other types of lights, we are proposing some changes to like the overall development light limit, which could impact like what types of bulbs they choose. But for the most part, a lot of commercial businesses are choosing LED because they save money over time, but it's not actually a requirement.
And then are these text amendments on the line of a one and done kind of thing, or do you anticipate coming back in future years with additional changes as technology changes? Can you talk to that?
We're asking, for the most part, we're asking for what we think needs to be changed at this time. In the future, if the board or commissioners wanted to talk about dark sky ordinances, that's definitely something that we'd be excited to discuss, but it really hasn't been pushed for at this point.
How much of a difference is there between these text amendments and say the dark sky that you're talking about? What is the difference between the two?
Yeah, it's a totally different way of rating lighting and measuring lighting, and it's not something that our staff is familiar with. We would have to do a wholesale replacement of the lighting sections of the text amendment, basically.
Thank you.
So how did we arrive at the things that we want to change? I mean, what prompted that?
It's a combination of understanding kind of what the complaints have been in the community over, decades of our staff doing this, keeping track of the conflicts in the ordinance that are just not working or are hard to interpret what the purpose was, and then seeing opportunities to provide developers with more options that might help save them money, but also help us reduce lighting kind of as the incentive for making those choices. So we're trying to provide more flexibility in exchange for things that would have community benefits. So there's a lot of different reasons that go into each one of these text amendments.
Have you had any groups or developers or members of the public that are opposed to these text amendments so far?
We've brought all of the proposals to our technical expertise committee. We've reached out to like Duke and to private developers to kind of throw some ideas off of them and see what the unintended consequences might be. And we've incorporated as many of those changes as we felt were appropriate. But we have not done any like widespread public engagement just with the general public at this point. That would be what the public comment in these meetings would be for. And then at the public hearing, that's where they'd have an opportunity to come and talk about it.
A couple, and y'all may not have the answer to this. One is thinking back to last year when they stripped counties of what they call down zoning. That's a very broad definition. Y'all looked at the implication of that on there are a couple things I noticed in the one were nonconformities in non-residential areas. So the way I understand this under at least the beginning is that we're treating under paragraph B, we're treating nonconformities with this policy as that going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be within non-commercial areas, because some of these zoning districts have the disparate treatment between them and what the requirements are. I guess my question is, can we do that?
Can we do?
So in 160D, when they stripped it, 160D, 601D, the way they define down zoning, there's three ways. One is by creating any type of nonconformity on land not in a residential zoning district, including a non-conforming use, non-conforming lot, non-conforming structure, non-conforming improvement, or non-conforming site element.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question and concern there is that these changes that would be non-conforming in non-residential zoning areas would run afoul of that. So it's more of a, have y'all done that kind of analysis to make sure we don't have a problem that way with the non-conforming uses in non-residential districts versus the residential?
Yeah, I haven't looked at that, so we'd probably need to look at that and see if there's any issues with that.
And then the other one that flagged for me was, so that's very narrow, nonconformities and non-residential uses. And then there were, I think it's the prohibitions, number 5. Not that I want animated signs, in fact, I don't. But that's just an outright prohibition, which
Mhm.
might be a violation just because it's now a prohibited type use in a residential context. So
Mhm.
that was the only other one I really saw. But and I don't know if it fundamentally then changes whether we want to do this or not if we can't really regulate within the non-commercial districts, because I understood that being a good bit of why you were doing this is where you get the rub between the residential and the non-residential type properties. So it's just more thoughts and comments than a question, but that was one.
Mhm.
And then the second one was, I'll be clear about this. I know it's floating around, the override on House Bill 171, which is the prohibition of DEI policies in local governments.
Mhm.
I know it's set maybe later this week to come up for a veto override, so it's not actually law at this point. But when this comes back up before us, we probably need to see what the status of that is and how we go about talking about this at the hearing. If it has been passed, I think it's going to
Yeah,
require
that's
us to change how we address this,
So-
what's in the report.
If that bill passes, we will get with Kurt and we will look at
Yeah, just
that.
a
and
flag. So,
Mhm.
Pivot if we need to pivot.
but I thought a lot of the stuff made a lot of good sense. I mean, I would like the dark sky stuff in general, but that's a very, as you said, a very different conversation. I think it has to be a lot. We'd have to plan that out. To do. And I don't know that hits the top of the list.
Another question I have is with the comprehensive plan, we have areas that are like mixed use. And we have a lot of people come before the board and they want to approve something for mixed use or whatever. And I'm thinking like a lot of the more modern developments, you have commercial on the first floor and you have condos on the second and the third floor. And then maybe you have a theater and a shopping center or whatever. How do you balance the needs of commercial and residential in one of those mixed use zoning districts? How do you address that lighting wise?
Well, just having an eye on how fixtures are cut off, like having those glare packages be a priority, making sure that the light is being directed at where it's supposed to go. For example, that's something we can see in our photometric plans. Right now, they have to show what angle that light is being pointed at in the plans. So we have enough information typically in a lighting plan to be able to tell where the light's going. And then we get spec sheets seeing how those fixtures are designed. You get like the side view of the fixture and you get a top view. So you can see whether that light is being cut off or not. It's a lot harder in a development where you have a mix of, condos on top of commercial, but the cutoff requirements do a lot to help alleviate that. If you're living in a super urban area, or a super urban development type like that, you are going to have more light impacts than if you are in a strictly residential area. So cutoffs, the color temperature is really important. Shielding is really important, that kind of stuff. That's really the only way that we can try to protect some of those residential uses.
So that's being considered now as we look at new developments, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And another thing that could be useful, and I see this come up in front of the Board of Adjustment, is when or if lighting is an issue for a special use permit. I would imagine it could be useful to the Board of Adjustment to have a list of things that they could ask for. And I don't know, and again, this wouldn't be a requirement, but it's just sort of here are a list of things that if added to, wouldn't apply to all developers, but could be added as a condition. So that they're not having to recreate the wheel and they can borrow from a table of recommended or best practices. I don't know if that could be included or something.
I can discuss it with the zoning
It's
administrator.
just
Any other thoughts? Are you going to continue or?
That's all I have for today.
Oh, okay. So now we'll listen to Bernie. And Bernie, if you'll tell everybody who you are and what area of the county you come from, that would be helpful. Yes.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak. And I want to first thank staff for putting this together. I think it's well constructed. I think there's some areas that still need to be addressed, and some of you brought those up already. and that's why I'm here. My name's Bernard Arguier. I've lived in Buncombe County for 33 years. In 2012, I helped draft the original lighting ordinance with David Gant. It fell short of a few things, but at least we got something in. So you do need to revise it. But technology's changed. At that point, there were LEDs, but there was a limited supply of Kelvin temperature LEDs. Now you can get almost every Kelvin temperature you want on all sizes of bulbs, including street lights and parking lot lights. So anyway, the first comment I had was on the section of conformity, 78657. It's really confusing in there how lights fit into that section of your ordinance. I think it's best because they're single fixtures and they're not going to go out. 50% of all the street lights aren't going to go out at once. So you need to have some kind of replacement. When a bulb goes out, the new bulb should conform instead of waiting for the whole town to go black before you conform. So something on conformities needs to be addressed. That's all I'm saying. And you've got it there. I don't think it's clear in that section. It talks about land, buildings, structures, but it doesn't mention light fixtures. Second comment, parking lot lighting is one of the biggest offenders in creating light pollution. And most of them are shielded, fully cut off, which is good, but it's the volume. There's so many of them. Cities like Pittsburgh are mandating all new parking lot lights dim at 10 p.m. when most people are gone. You don't need it lit up like a football field at 10 p.m. You still need some lighting for security. I'm not against that, but we could dim it down. That would save more energy and, of course, minimize light pollution for people like me who were out in my telescope at night. I was involved with UNC Asheville's observatory design and plan. So, but we're not trying to make it dark for UNC Asheville. That's not why I'm here. But it is nice. Suspended strings of lights. I think with the 45 lumens that you're proposing for LEDs, that's good because it's hard to find lower luminosity on LEDs for individual bulbs and that. But then I would require, because you can find lower Kelvin temperatures, if they're going to use 45, don't have 6,000 degree Kelvin, it's blinded. Have them use 3,000 Kelvin, they're readily available for LED strings. I checked it online. Okay, the next thing is maximum Kelvin temperatures. To me, there's no reason to have anyone use above 3,000. They're available for street lights, parking lot lights. It's the same amount of lumens. You can see just as well. It's just a yellower light, not a whitish blue light. So think about that. Duke Energy, when they reinstalled your lights, Duke does not use 3,000. They should. They need to be forced to do it. They put in 4,300 Kelvin lights. If you drive down any street in Asheville and you look up at that light, you're almost night blinded. It's so glaring. And of course, the American Medical Association has a resolution where they say no light should be above 3,000 Kelvin. Dark Sky International follows the American Medical Association with that, recommending that you stick with 3,000 or less. Just because it's commercial, even under a gas station canopy, you're not doing surgery there. You don't need that many lumens. You want safety, yes, but you don't need 6,000 Kelvin or 4,000 Kelvin lights. And then dusted on security lights. I know you use foot candles, but nobody's going to the store if they put in their own dusted on light and seeing foot candles on the package because it's a mathematical formula based on height, lumens, and all kinds of other stuff. And even if it was there, I'm not sure they could calculate it. So I'd say you should put some kind of a lumen restriction on those instead, because they're going to go right to that section and say, what can I put in for my dusted on light? And they don't want to see foot candles because it's too confusing. The bulb's going to be rated with lumens, and you've already restricted it, I think, to 3,000 Kelvin, if I've read that changes right. So that's good. So I think that's most of my comments, and unless you have something to add to my comments.
I just have a quick question born out of total ignorance. Is there a significant price difference between a 3,000 Kelvin bulb and a 4500?
No, they're not. And if you've
Okay.
gone to a hardware
So
store
it's not a,
to
it's
buy
not a,
interior bulbs, they're the same price.
okay.
And I didn't mention, cities all across the country are now mandating 3,000 Kelvin bulbs. Pittsburgh replaced all its LEDs with 2,700 degree Kelvin, not 3,000. Here's other cities: Chicago, Phoenix, Knoxville, Tennessee, Davis, California, Haines City, Florida, Groveland, Florida, Washington, D.C., all 3,000 Kelvin and less for all lights, not
Right.
just even commercial lighting and parking lot lighting, 3,000 or less. So that's really what's happening. Is that 3,000 Kelvin is coming. Almost the whole country is going to get there eventually. Why not do it now and not have to revise it in 3 years? That's
Right.
just my
Right.
suggestion.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't imposing
And they're
some kind
readily
of
available.
economic
They
hardship.
were not in 2012.
Yeah.
So
What was the feedback from Duke on Calvin rate?
Duke did not comment, to my knowledge, on Kelvin. They were most concerned that we got the height maximums correct. That was their primary concern.
Does staff have any concern with reducing? The way I read this is it's 3,000 Kelvin within essentially our residential districts, and then 4,000 within broader commercial districts, and limited exceptions for 5,000 gas stations, sports fields, performance areas.
For the most part, color temperature, those Kelvin ratings are very much about personal preference. The commercial developments, especially gas stations, they tend to want everything to look like it's the middle of the day. So they want daylight. And that is their preference. If we were just talking about health and safety, you would want to have the lower Kelvin ratings.
Do y'all have, I mean, if we were to say just change them all to 3,000, big factor.
I'm not sure if there would be pushback from the development community or not. It would limit the upper level, the higher intensity lighting options that they could choose from.
What about sports fields and events?
Well, that is one of those exceptions for the 5,000 Kelvin. Those sports fields, especially in trying to attract, regional or even statewide tournaments, they need very high Kelvin ratings to be able to meet some of the requirements. They need those fields to look like it's the middle of the day at night in order to attract those type of big tournaments.
And we talked to our Parks and Rec department about those.
Yes.
So part of those are our Parks and Rec.
yeah, I think that's not one I'm talking against.
Mhm.
As long as they shut them off when the game's off,
Yes.
when the game's done.
Yeah.
Because you're right, they need better, that's when you want a daylight effect.
Mhm.
So,
So it's those commercial type districts that are 4,000 that could conceivably go to 3.
Those are like the retail stores. Those are where we're talking about maybe lowering some of them, especially if they're located in a more residential area.
I mean, assuming we can do this, like that's the big assumption, but I'd have no problem putting that at 3,000, just like the residential districts, and then having the exception for, as you spelled out, very specific type things that have unique needs to deal with them.
I would agree with what John just said too.
I'm going to agree with that as well. That would be my preference down the road when we have a quorum.
yeah, I think it's going to be a matter of time where you're going to see that you're not keeping up with the rest of the country. So you might as well get on it now. We don't want to go through these changes again in 3 years, do we? Well, thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it.
A quick question. I was glad to hear you had some input on the UNCA Observatory. My experience when I go up there and I'm on Lookout Mountain and I've spent time up there and looked at the ambient light from the community. It seems to be fairly well under control. It doesn't seem like the light pollution from Asheville impacts Lookout Mountain too much, but I am not an expert on that, and I'm just kind of layman looking at it. Can you comment a little bit on
I
your
can.
contribution to the observatory, and then
Yeah,
what your thoughts are on ambient area lighting impacting that observatory?
Well, there's a little history. I've been into amateur astronomer. I didn't pay the rent doing astronomy for over 50 years, and I built a private observatory of my own in Hawk Creek. It's with a roll-off roof and a large telescope and a go-to mount in 2003. I live on 14 acres there. So then come 2009, I built one up on a mountain in Madison County, which is called Grassland Mountain. It's owned by the Astronomy Club of Asheville. They operate it.
Been
I'm the
there.
lead docent. And that one's in a dark sky area. So
Yep.
there's no lights anywhere around that place. So then it comes time in 2014, university got a hold of me and asked me to help them design this one. They had a design team and I was one of the few people on the team. And yes, it does have some light pollution. We're in a city, but for a city, it's not too bad because we already had Buncombe County in 2012 and Asheville back around 2007 put in lighting ordinances. So they're not perfect. That's why we're here today. But they do restrict a lot of the outdoor lighting, and it makes it not so bad. The town of Asheville, the city of Asheville, is south of Lookout, not far. So when we're observing, if it's low in the southern sky, I don't look at it because it's blurred out. But if it's in the north, the west, or the east, or high up, we see pretty well. If you've been up there, you can see the planets, some of the star clusters. What's impacted are galaxies and nebula. They're very faint and white. They need a dark background. White doesn't look well on white. You can't pop it out. So I hope that answers your question.
Are there any recommendations you would make in that regard, just going forward, since we do have a very expensive observatory in the city of Asheville now, and other observatories? I've been to the one in Madison that you talked about. I'm aware of one in Yancey County.
Yes, there
and
is. They're in a.
Apparently, I need to
dark
come to your
area, too.
house. So
Well, actually, if you implement these types of changes, and the city of Asheville's behind you, they have not implemented lower Kelvin yet. They've been resistant. Their Sustainability Advisory Committee in 2018, just before COVID, I went there and they passed a resolution to drop it to 3,000. I brought it to city council, sustainability, and they thought about it and they didn't do it. And to this day, whenever I bring it up, they don't move on it. I'm not sure what's going on. If they're Duke Energy, to tell you the truth, is not crazy about dropping the Kelvin. They like the 4,000. So maybe there's something to do with a relationship with Duke. I don't know. But they have not done it yet, but they should.
thank you, sir.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. We appreciate your time and your comments. Most helpful.
So we will send the video to the other planning board members and ask them to review it. And we will schedule a work session in October and then hopefully vote on this in November.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. Thank you. And I did think this looked very good with my limited knowledge of all that, but
The presentation was great. Thank
yeah,
you.
Thank
it was.
We call Shannon our lighting queen. She really, really loves lighting.
That's good.
I love the absence of lighting.
That's also good.
She loves the absence of lighting.
Come to the dark side.
She's our lighting ordinance interpreter whenever anybody else in the department has our question.
You're the lighting whisperer.
She is the lighting whisperer.
So
Great.
I guess, are we ready to adjourn? Although I guess we don't officially
Can't
adjourn.
officially adjourn.
No,
We'll
it's-
just
I'm just
stop.
gonna walk out.
Okay.
Stop
All
talking.
right, we're stopping. You all may leave.
You're all free to go, yeah.
Thank you, folks.
Yes, thank you for being here, all of you.